Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, it's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. Today, we are finishing our rise of totalitarianism, our rise of totalitarian rulers, dictators, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to shift to an Asian country today and not necessarily focus on Japan and what's to come for World War II in our next unit, but actually we're going to take a look at China. So the sleeping giant. Let's get into it. Let's talk about it. So this is a new chapter. So make sure you put it's a two title note day. So put this at the top of the margin. Nationalism around the world, chapter 11. We're only going to be talking about one lecture. So, put this up there because it is a new chapter. But again, it's the only section we're going to look at in regards to this unit. All right, Revolutionary Chaos in China. Chapter, that should say 11. Jeez. Chapter 11, Lesson 3. Revolutionary Chaos in China. That was your warm-up. Students will be able to compare and contrast urban and rural China to identify some of the problems Chiang Kai-shek faced. All right, China. So revolutionary Marxism had its greatest impact in China. By 1920, central authority had almost ceased to exist in China. Two different political forces began to emerge as competitors for the right to rule China. Sun Yat-sen's Nationalist Party, driven from the political arena several years earlier, and the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. In 1921, a group of young radicals, including several faculty and staff members from Beijing University, founded the Chinese Communist Party in the commercial and industrial city of Shanghai. Comintern agents from Russia, Soviet Union, soon advised the new party to join with the more experienced Nationalist Party. Sun Yat-sen, leader of the Nationalists, welcomed this cooperation. He needed the expertise and diplomatic support that the Soviet Union could provide. His anti-imperialist words alienated many Western powers. A English newspaper in Shanghai wrote, "All his life, all his influence, all his energies are devoted to the ideas to keep China in turmoil, and it is utterly undesirable and improper that he should be allowed to prosecute those aims there." So, in 1923, the Nationalists and Communists formed an alliance to oppose the warlords and to drive out the imperialist powers out of China. So, the spheres of influence that were over there. That's Sun Yat-sen on the left. I don't know how accurate this photo is, but I looked up Chinese Communist Party formed, and these are the men that were in the picture. Sneaking and this and all right. So for more than 3 years, the two parties overlooked their mutual suspicions and worked together. They formed a revolutionary army to march north and to seize control over China. This so-called Northern Expedition in the summer of 1926. By the following spring, revolutionary forces had taken control of all China south of the Changjiang River, or the Yangtze River in English, including major river ports of Wuhan and Shanghai. But tensions between the two parties eventually rose to the surface. Sun Yat-sen died in 1925, and the general Chiang Kai-shek, Jiang Zishi, his military subordinate, succeeded him as head of the Nationalist Party. Chiang Kai-shek pretended to support the alliance with the communists, but actually planned to destroy them. In April 1927, he struck against the communists in Shanghai, killing thousands. After this so-called Shanghai Massacre, the Nationalist Communist Alliance ceased to exist. In 1928, Chiang Kai-shek founded a new Chinese republic at Nanjing. During the next 3 years, he worked to reunify China. Although Chiang Kai-shek saw Japan as a serious threat, he believed that the communists were more dangerous. He once remarked that the Japanese are like a disease of the skin, and the communists are like a disease of the heart. Wow, that's mean. So rude. So this is the northern trek all the way up to Peking, Manchuria. And then this is I think this is Chiang Kai-shek right here. That's Chiang Kai-shek. Who am I kidding? That's him. And here's some people dying. Massacre, of course. Dead bodies. Communist beginning. So after the Shanghai Massacre, 1927, most communist leaders went hiding into the city. There, they tried to revive the communist movement in its traditional urban base among the working class. Shanghai was a rich recruiting ground for the party, as people were discontented and looking for leadership. Some of the party members, however, fled to the mountainous Jiangxi province south of the Yangtze River. They were led by the young communist organizer Mao Zedong. Unlike other leading members of the Communist Party, Mao was convinced that a Chinese revolution would be driven by the poverty-stricken peasants in the countryside rather than the urban working class. Kind of different from what Marx said. Mao, the son of a prosperous peasant, had organized the peasant movement in southern China during the early 20s, so he kind of knows what he's talking about. Chiang Kai-shek now tried to root out the communists of their urban base in Shanghai and the rural base in the Jiangxi province. He succeeded in the first task in 1931, as most party leaders in Shanghai were forced to flee to Mao's base in southern China. Chiang Kai-shek then turned his forces against Mao's stronghold in the province. His forces outnumbered Mao's, but Mao made effective use of guerrilla tactics, using unexpected methods such as sabotage and deception to fight the enemy. I wonder where he learned that from. So that's a young Mao Zedong, and these are the Communist Party leaders. This is where we're talking about. I believe, so this is Shanghai. I believe the Shandong is where Nanjing is. So kick him out of there and then go in here. All right, the Long March. So 1934, Chiang's troops, with their superior military strength, surrounded the communist base in Jiangxi and set up a blockade of the stronghold. With the villages behind Chiang's troops, no food or supplies could pass through the communist base. Chiang even built small forts to prevent communist raids. However, Mao's army, the People's Liberation Army, PLA, broke through nationalist lines and began its famous Long March. Both Mao and Chiang knew that unless Mao's army could cross the Yangtze River, it would be wiped out. So Mao's army began this desperate race. Moving on foot through the mountains, marshes, rivers, and deserts, the army travels almost 6,000 miles to reach the last surviving communist base in northwest China. That's about 24 miles a day, give or take, on average. All along those miles, Mao's troops had to fight Chiang's army. Many of Mao's troops will freeze or starve. 1 year later, Mao's troops reached the safety of the dusty hills of northern China. Of the 90,000 troops that embarked on this journey, only 9,000 remained. And in the course of the Long March, Mao Zedong had become the sole leader of the Chinese Communist Party. The people at the time who lived, it must have seemed that the communist threat to the Nanjing regime was over, but the communists remained hope for the future. So they went all the way around from down here, Jiangxi, all the way up to northern China, the last communist stronghold that was there. That's the PLA. That's some propaganda for Mao. Long March, because people are so happy. New China. So even while trying to root out Mao's communist forces, Chiang was trying to build a new Chinese nation. He publicly declared his commitment to Sun Yat-sen's plans for a republican government, but first, a transitional period would occur because, people don't like change. In keeping with Sun's program, Chiang Kai-shek announced a period of political tutelage or training to prepare the Chinese people for a final stage of constitutional government. Even the humblest peasant would be given time to understand the country's problems and the new government. In the meantime, the nationalists used their dictatorial power to carry out a land reform program and modernization of the urban industrial sector. It would take more than plans on paper to create a new China. Years of neglect and civil war had severely weakened the political, economic, and social fabric of the nation. Faint signs of an impending industrial revolution were appearing in the major urban centers. But most of the people living in the countryside were drained by warfare and civil strife. Rural peasants, about 80% of China's population, were still poor and overwhelmingly illiterate. Meanwhile, a westernized middle class began to form in the cities. It was here that the new Nanjing government found much of its support. The new westernized elite were concerned with the middle class Western values of individual advancement and material accumulation. They had few links with peasants in the countryside or with the rickshaw driver running in this world of suffering. The rickshaw is where they're carrying those carriages with two wheels. That's a rickshaw. In the cities, observers would have believed Chiang Kai-shek had lifted China in the modern world. Young people in the cities wore European clothes, and they went to the movies and listened to the radio because 1930. That's what people do. Here's some bringing China forward, modernized, more life. Chiang Kai-shek was aware of the problems of introducing foreign ideas in a population that was still culturally conservative. While attempting to build a modern industrial state, he tried to bring together modern Western innovations with traditional Confucian values of hard work and obedience. With his U.S.-educated wife, Sun Mei-ling, Chiang Kai-shek set up the New Life movement. Its goal was to promote traditional Confucian social ethics, such as integrity, propriety, and righteousness. 4 Confucian virtues would serve as guides for the living: Li, Yi, Lin, and Qi. I'm sorry if I pronounced those wrong. So courtesy, duty, honesty, honor. At the same time, it rejected what was viewed as excessive individualism and material greed of Western capitalist values. Unfortunately for Chiang Kai-shek, Confucian ideas have been widely discredited when the traditional system failed to provide answers for China's decline. Interesting. Chiang Kai-shek faced a host of other problems. The Nanjing government had total control over only a handful of provinces in the Changjiang Valley, Yangtze River Valley. Also, the Japanese threatened to gain control of northern China. The Great Depression was also having an ill effect on China's economy, and all of these problems created difficulties for Chiang Kai-shek. That's his wife. I looked up Confucian values, and this is what I saw. Don't smoke or eat while walking, and say sorry if you bump into someone on the streets. I looked up Confucian values, and these 5 came up, so maybe they added some. All right, last slide. In spite of all these problems, Chiang Kai-shek did have some success. He undertook a massive road building project and repaired and extended much of the country's railroad system as well. More than 50,000 miles of highways were built around and through the coastal areas. New factories, most of which Chinese owned, were opened. Through a series of agreements, the foreign powers ended many of their leases, gave up extraterritorial rights, and returned the customs service to the Chinese control. Chiang established a national bank and improved the education system. The government was also repressive. Fearing communist influence, Chiang Kai-shek suppressed all opposition and censored free expression. In doing so, he alienated many intellectuals and political moderates. Because Chiang's support came from the rural landed gentry as well as the urban middle class, he did not push for programs that would lead to a redistribution of wealth, the shifting of wealth from a rich minority to a poor majority. A land reform program was enacted in 1930, but had little effect on the country. For peasants and the poor townspeople, no real improvement occurred under the Nanjing government. Chiang Kai-shek's government had little more success in promoting industrial development. Between 1927 and 1937, industrial growth in China only averaged about 1% per year. Much of the national wealth was in the hands of the so-called 4 families, a group of senior officials and close subordinates of the ruling elite. Military expenses took up approximately half of the budget and little money that was left over for social and economic development. The new government then had little success in dealing with the deep-seated economic and social problems that affected China during the interwar years. This was especially true with the internal disintegration and foreign pressure were occurring during the virtual collapse of a global economic order during the Great Depression. And in addition, militant political forces in Tokyo were determined to extend Japanese influence and power in an unstable China. So was there really progress? Who knows? Industrialization. Hey, I put that picture twice on there. Here's a railroad. I'm gonna delete that. Make this railroad picture bigger. But yeah, so was there real progress in China under Chiang Kai-shek? I don't know. It's kind of, hearsay. Uh, I looked at the four families, and I think this is a movie or a book. It's on Amazon. So I think it might be a book. And here's the militarist Japanese imperial flag right there. And that is going to conclude this unit. So talked really fast through that lecture. But I felt that we had to talk a little bit about China to understand when we talk about Japan, especially with World War II around the corner, because that's our next unit, World War II. So that concludes this unit of study, rise of totalitarianism and the interwar years. So we talked about the Great Depression, Mussolini, Hitler, Stalin, and Mao Zedong and Chiang Kai-shek. So, hey, it's a lot. It's a lot through four sections of notes. So, yeah, that's going to conclude this lecture. Your homework is to do page 420, 420, 2 through 4, 2, 3, and 4. All right. So if you guys did enjoy that, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.